Thank you, Suzanne, for the kind introduction. And I'm going to start with a quote and end with a quote as well. The first one's a little bleak. The end quote perhaps provides a little more hope and optimism. The first quote is from Klaus Schwab, who is the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum. Aging is widely seen as one of the most significant risks to global prosperity in the decades ahead because of its potentially profound economic, social, and political implications. Global aging in developed and so-called developed and developing countries alike will dramatically alter the way that societies and economies work. Now, every article in gerontology starts with some reference to this demographic imperative, and this is really no exception. The WHO reports that from 2000 to 2050, the proportion of the world's population over 60 years will have doubled from 11% to 22%. The number of people aged 60 years and over is expected to increase from 605 million to 2 billion over the same period. 80% of older people will live in low and middle income countries. Chile, China, and the Islamic Republic of Iran will have a greater proportion of older people than the United States of America. The number of older people in Africa will grow from 54 million to 213 million. Now, at the global level, there are two factors primarily that have combined have led to the current demographic shift. One of them was mentioned yesterday with some force, and it relates to the declining fertility rates around the world. And as you can see, these are quite significant across the world, but especially in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, where there's been a significant decline in fertility rates, providing fewer children as we look around. The second factor, of course, is greater life expectancy, and it's reflected in this chart. And I would suggest that the chart suggests that a new analysis found that global life expectancy increased by about 6 years from 1990 to 2013. And as you see, a lot of that reduction was the result of programs to address communicable diseases. Now, there's a third factor at the local level, which often plays a very significant role. Another reason why communities at the local level grow older, perhaps just as significant, and it's the combined phenomenon of a growing population of older adults and the out-migration of the young, leading to what some of you may have heard the phrase before, naturally occurring retirement communities. And this is, again, a global phenomenon. Now, the cost of addressing these changes is often characterized as potentially catastrophic silver tsunami that will overwhelm world economies. The demographics of aging are undeniable and possibly world-changing. Whether the change is for the good or not, whether the change is for the good or portends a looming catastrophe is a subject of current debate, however. Klaus Schwab, echoing many world leaders, notes that the lack of institutionalized pension systems is a chief barrier to the well-being of elders, especially in light of changing family patterns and the loss of traditional supports, often promoted by migration. And you can see a good portion of the world has very low or non-existent pension supports for older adults. It's in the gray area there. The second major system affected by this demographic change, of course, are healthcare systems. And this is a chart that reflects the general government expenditure on health as a percentage of total government expenditure for 2011. And you can see that in the developed world, of course, the percentage is rather high, but it's still very low in other places around the world. I'm not suggesting that the more we spend on healthcare, the more we get. However, clearly in many places around the world, the capability of spending more on healthcare systems is limited. It's important to note that some of the chief issues affecting the health of the older population and the adult and child population around the world have to do with things like increases in raised blood pressure. And I found it interesting that that's so problematic in the continent of Africa. The prevalence of overweight among males age 18 and above, very significant. 60% population, males over the age of 18 in Russia, United States, Australia, are overweight. Of course, tobacco is another major factor leading to chronic illness around the world, particularly in Russia. And there are huge costs and mortality rates associated with tobacco. And the shift in tobacco use from the developed world to the developing world is very significant. In the 21st century, it's estimated there will be 1 billion deaths due to tobacco-related diseases. So many of the health conditions we are talking about are chronic in nature. And what's notable and significant, as even in the poorest countries, the biggest killers these days are not communicable diseases, but heart disease, stroke, and chronic lung disease. The greatest causes of disability are visual impairment, dementia, hearing loss, and osteoarthritis. And this is not just this is a global phenomenon now. The WHO reports that from a projected total of 58 million deaths from all causes in 2005, it's estimated that chronic diseases will account for 35 million, which is double the number of deaths from all infectious diseases. Moreover, 80% of worldwide deaths from non-infectious diseases occur in low and middle income countries. So we need to pay much, much more attention to chronic illness and its role in society. Now, unhealthy diet, physical activity, and tobacco use are key factors in the development of chronic disease, of course. The treatment of intermediate risk factors such as prediabetes, hypertension, and obesity will require mobilizing primary care resources across the planet, and this will be extremely costly. However, given that these intermediate risk factors are preventable through primary prevention, it's quite clear that public health, not biomedicine, is the way out of the silver tsunami. Focusing on the development of healthy environments, including age-friendly ones, is certainly the path that we must take. Focusing on environments for aging, however, presents its own set of challenges. At least in the biomedical model, the dominant discourse on healthy aging, modeled after Western biomedicine, is about individual aging bodies and not communities nor environments. Individual lifestyle and personal responsibility. Get my pages right here. Individual lifestyle and personal responsibility are offered as the ticket to successful aging. In their critique of the lifestyle discourse in American culture, Howell and Ingram quote the former Surgeon General Louis Sullivan on how to improve the nation's health. First, he says, personal responsibility, which is to say responsibility and enlightened behavior by each and every individual, is the key to good health. In talking of the disparity of health between those of lower socioeconomic status, the so-called disadvantaged and the poor of society, Sullivan continued, if we are to extend the benefits of good health to all of our people, it's crucial that we build in our most vulnerable populations what I have called a culture of character, which is to say a culture or a way of thinking and being that actively promotes responsible behavior and the adoption of lifestyles that are maximally conducive to good health. Now, Howell and Ingram attribute the development of this lifestyle craze to a changing relationship among labor, capital, and government introduced during the Reagan years. Changes favoring capital, of course. They describe the transformation of public issues into personal troubles and problems of lifestyle, and the redefinition of illness, health care, and even unemployment as private issues of character. As the call for personal responsibility became ubiquitous, there arose a rich opportunity for the commodification of wellness, for the corporatization of wellness, and the commodification of the body. Public governance became operative through the virtual redefinition of the self. And given its numbers, it was no coincidence that the baby boom generation became a prime target for the commodification of the self. The approach to prevention following this medical model also involve intervention at the level of the individual. Harmenstein and Potkanowitz provide an exemplary review of the many regimens available to be adopted by older adults. The news for the baby boomer generation is indeed positive regarding their upcoming late life years. Behaviors, thinking patterns, and emotional and spiritual lifestyles in middle age, factors over which individuals have significant control, have much more impact on health and satisfaction in the 7th and 8th decade of life than was once believed possible. Successful or healthy aging is a goal within reach. Now, I wouldn't totally disagree with that statement, except I would say that it's fairly limited in its perspective on health. Behavior and healthcare, in fact, have played a moderate but not a dominant role in population health. While not much can be done to modify the genetic component of health, clearly environmental factors, broadly defined, play a major role in community health. It can be argued that investing in environmental interventions should be at least on par with the huge investment made in medical care and personal wellness. In fact, a radical revision of what we mean by health in the first place might be in order. And I would suggest that Wendell Berry may have something with this quote. To be healthy is literally to be whole. Our sense of wholeness is not just the completeness in ourselves, but is also the sense of belonging to others and to our place. I believe that the community, in the fullest sense, a place and all its creatures, is the smallest unit of health, and that to speak of the health of an isolated individual is a contradiction in terms. So clearly we need a new community model of health and a model of public health that goes beyond health education and the promotion of personal responsibility. I think the age-friendly community movement, in some sense, is a response to this need. Aging, I've come to believe, is not about time in the body, but about relationships and the meaning of place. I think all along we've been asking the wrong question. We've been asking, when is old age, when we should be asking, where is old age? So thinking of aging as a kind of a geographic phenomenon, I think, is worthwhile. Clearly, aging is not so much a personal problem as a community challenge. And traditionally, we've not met this challenge very well. We have separated the issue from our daily lives along with other domains by creating fragmented communities in which work and commerce and play and old people are separated from one another into separate domains. When we pay attention to the needs of older adults, we have a tendency to want to institutionalize and commodify those needs and create complete communities, continuing care retirement communities in which you can get every single thing that you need without stepping off the lot. However, we have a lot of traditional communities around the country and around the world where if we would superimpose the notion of a retirement community on the traditional fabric of a particular community, we would find that the traditional community offers many things that the institutionalized communities offer and enables older people to access services and goods by virtue of their own labor rather than tying them into the monetary economy. You can see how big these CCRCs, continuing care retirement communities, can get. It spans multiple blocks in this little town of Kendallville in northwest Indiana. Now, there have been a number of age-friendly frameworks proposed over the last 10 years, and one of the most prominent is the WHO Blueprint for Age-Friendly Cities. It identifies 8 domains for action relative to creating more livable communities for older adults. The domain of housing, the domain of transportation and social inclusion. Lots of good visual ideas represented here. Respect and social inclusion, and a role for the contributions of older people in our communities. Communication and information, access to information, which is so critical these days to health and well-being, and from which so many people are disfranchised. Community and health services. Again, getting beyond the idea of centralizing health services to distribute them to where people live. Social participation by providing opportunities for lifelong learning and voluntary contributions to the community, and civic participation and employment as important features of a livable community for older adults. So there are a lot of issues to work on and a number of frameworks that one could select. What we've been doing in my town is to take more of a public policy approach to livable communities for older adults. And we've been intentionally trying to address and merge issues in the disability community with issues of aging, which is why we've kind of gotten away from the age-friendly community phrase and speak of lifetime communities. We need to incorporate attention to childhood at some point, and I suspect that we will as we move along. But the definition of a lifetime community is it's a zoning and public policy innovation created to incentivize and influence community development and redevelopment initiatives that promote livability for all ages and abilities. And so let me check my time here, see how I'm doing. Am I about halfway in?
You have about 5 minutes left.
Okay, I'm not going to show you my little video of the Beeline Trail, but if you remember Mayor Brainerd talking about the Monon Trail in Carmel, this is the same rail line. It comes right south into Bloomington, right through the middle of town, and it's a phenomenal asset, a former rail line that's been converted into a multi-use trail. We're focusing on a 3.1 mile section of the trail as it goes through the middle of town. It has a number of wonderful elements along the way, including these iconic structures like our former furniture factory, which is now City Hall. Wonderful public art commemorating the limestone in our community, which has played a central role in our development over the years, and incredible farmers market right on the trail that's very, very well attended every Saturday morning. There are about 1,500 older adults, I should say people over 50, if you'll grant that, living in the 8 neighborhoods along the trail. And so that's the focus of our effort. There are about 6,000 people living in those neighborhoods, and that's sort of the area that we'd like to concentrate on through the development of a district that would allow us to consolidate and target services and policies. We're looking at pocket neighborhoods along the trail that may have some specific value or asset that could be developed, such as the wellness zone. It's actually not on this map here, but we're looking, these are actually walk sheds, and a 10-minute walk for an older adult is 1,800 yards, 1,800 feet, I'm sorry. So when we talk about a 10-minute walk, we need to account for some of those physiological differences. We're looking at transects, trying to look at what's appropriate in terms of development along the trail. And this is not so much a reference to the natural environment as is to what people would allow and accept and support along the trail in terms of what's appropriate development, how high can we go in certain places. So we've been looking at other assets along the trail and potential nodes that could be developed with reference to the transects, the character of the surrounding neighborhoods, looking at program potential in terms of the numbers of housing units that could be developed along the trail on currently developable properties, those kinds of things. We feel housing is a kind of a catalyst, so we're spending some attention looking at ways to expand the range of housing options for older adults along the trail. This was a proposal that is now in place. It's a really wonderful collection of houses along the Beeline Trail. And Habitat for Humanity has gotten into the game, and they're developing a neighborhood right along the trail. We've been looking at infill housing, the development of cottages that could be used on separate lots, subdivided lots, empty lots, so forth. We're looking at accessory dwelling units and changing our public policy relative to secondary units, which are currently illegal in the neighborhood that the trail cuts through. And we're trying to animate, perhaps most importantly, we're trying to animate the neighborhoods to help older adults and help people of all ages really to meet some of their needs and services outside of the monetary economy. We had our first Share Fest a couple of weeks ago, and we helped neighborhoods build little free libraries. If you know what a little free library is, it's a box with books that's on the street corner. People share their books. We help people make rain barrels to take home to collect rain at their houses. We commemorated the Glenn Carter Tool Shed, which is a tool share program on the trail. You can come in and borrow tools that you might need, and we started and had an orientation for a new time bank program. And Time Bank program is now up to 75 people, and that will provide an opportunity for people to share their skills and their assets with one another. So we've developed this policy framework for creating a district which identifies the elements of the district, some of the public policy tools that could be used to influence this development, and some attention to what sources of capital might be available to support the development. And we feel that the sharing economy and non-monetary capital, social capital, and cultural capital may be important elements in developing such an environment. But it's important to pay attention to the intangibles. This is really what gives sense of place to an environment. Laughter, movement, beauty, choice, and memory. And I have a particular interest in memory because I think a community that supports memory helps valorize the role and the place of older adults in a community as repositories of memory. Wendell Berry says again, every human community, if it is to last, must exert a kind of centripetal force, holding local soil and local memory in place. And I can't think of a better definition of sustainability in my own mind than what's offered there. So if we do this right, and this echoes a little bit what Jan Gale was saying at the supper last night, that if you go into a community and you can see kids everywhere, or if Christopher Alexander would say you see old people everywhere, you know you're in a livable community. And it's a pretty nice short indicator that we can all use in evaluating and reflecting on the communities that we live in.